Welcome to this configuration tutorial for the Element app's automotive use case. In this step-by-step guide, you will find how to configure our app elements copy and sync. Let's start with our source instance. We first need to connect our source instance with its target, so we go to the Connections panel. We need to add our remote instance. Insert the URL. The request is send. Now we must accept it in the remote instance. Go to Connections in the target instance. Review the request and accept to apply the connection. Back to the source instance. We can now create our recipe. We choose the recipe copy and synchronize Jira work items. We can select our remote instance as target. Select the space from which you want to copy your work items. We can run the configuration tester to see if it detects our work items. We can click on it to verify the work items found. Now, we select the project where we need to copy the work items. We can specify the type of work item we want to create. Then, we set the fields from the source work item we want to synchronize. We can add all the Elements Connect custom fields we created in the target instance. If the fields are not created yet, they will not be available in the section. We also want to add other useful fields. We enable the sync on all fields and choose bidirectional, meaning a change in a work item will affect the other instance's work item. We enable the copy of comments. And synchronize them in bidirectional. And it's the same for the attachments. Finally, we configure the synchronization of the workflows. We choose the workflow from the source and target instance. We can now map the statuses. This allows you to configure how the work item's status is updated, based on the status selected for its copy in the other instance. We select the mappings options. We don't need to do the copy triggers in this use case, as we're going to configure our trigger later in the post function. So we can save our recipe. Finally, we can activate the recipe. Now, we need to put our recipe in our project workflow. We choose the transition where we want the recipe to activate. We create a Perform Actions rule. We select the Elements Copy and Sync rule. We add the recipe and configure the rule according to our needs. The workflow is updated, and the recipe is ready to use. Let's test it in a work item. We initiate the status transition and, consequently, the activation of the recipe. We can see in the admin section a work item has been created. Also, we can check the logs to see if everything was right during the recipe activation. Thanks for following this tutorials. Don't hesitate to check our other step-by-step guide on Elements Connect and Elements Overview.